We're talking eras. Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to talk about some NBA players that, in my opinion, would do really well in today's league. Not just really well, I think they would be better in today's league. As you see on the timeline, there's been a lot of conversation about how X player would play in X era on both sides of the coin. How would current players play in old eras? How would old players play in current eras? And my thing is, I'm not really trying to argue about that right now, but I did just find it interesting. It was an interesting activity to me to just think of which NBA players would from the past would genuinely be better today, right? Not on some they'd still be good today, right? Not on some they'd still be great today. I'm talking about players that if you plot them the way that they played in today's league, they would be perceived as better players. We would view them in a better light because of how the game is today. And these were players that truly were just ahead of their time. You know, let me know if I missed any. I tried to stay in the realm of players that I personally feel like I have a good grasp of how they play. So probably don't expect a lot of 80s players from me. Don't expect a lot of 90s players from me. A lot of these players will be in the 2000s, right? And I want to start off with Kobe Bryant, bro. Before we move on with the rest of the video, I just want to shout out PrizePicks for sponsoring this video. My personal favorite way to play daily fantasy sports. All you got to do is download their app or go on their website and sign up for an account. I would love to make some PGA picks if I knew anything about golf, but I do know about basketball. They got a bunch of different stats on the board, and at the end of the day, all you got to do is know ball, man. Is Dennis Schroeder going to get more than 13.5 points against Orlando? I personally don't think so. I'm going to go less on that. Is Asir Thompson going to get more than 11.5 points against Toronto? I also don't think he can. I don't know what it is. I'm feeling like a hater today. Press place entry, and that is how you make an entry on PrizePicks. And thanks to our friends over at PrizePicks, if you guys use code SLZ, you guys will get a 100% match on your first deposit up to $100. Links will be in the description for everything down below, and shout out to PrizePicks for sponsoring this video. I think if you plop 2003 Kobe in today's league, he would be a much more effective player. If you plop 2006 Kobe in today's league, he would be a much better player. Because even back then, he was already in the best in the world conversations, but people were kind of holding it off because of how good Tim Duncan and Shaquille O'Neal specifically were, right? And at a later point, LeBron James. But I think in today's era, if you plop Kobe in today's era, there is nothing that tells me that Kobe Bryant would not be a top 3-2 player in today's league. There's nothing. We're talking about elite shot creation, elite slashing to the basket, elite playmaking, switchability on defense. If we want to talk about the intangibles, he got it. I would love to see Kobe Bryant operate in space. In space. in an era where illegal defense is not a thing, but offensive talent is so much better to the point where illegal defense is has been pseudo brought back. I would love to see Kobe Bryant in today's era. And I don't think anyone is judging Kobe Bryant's left-handedness, right? I don't think there's less judgment on how Kobe's shooting would translate in today's league, right? When you're looking at a player who, you know, in his prime was already shooting 38% from three. You know, I think 36, 35% from three is pretty decent as a scorer, as a volume scorer during that era. And, yeah, I think a lot of that would translate in today's league. And I personally think, given today's era, he would have a better chance of winning more MVPs in today's era than in this era, in my opinion. And how our perception would change with Kobe Bryant if he won more MVPs would be very interesting, in my opinion. But yeah, Kobe in today's era, I think he'd be better. The next player I want to bring up is Kevin Garnett. And mind you, with this activity, I am not thinking of, if all these players were brought into the league, what the rankings would be. Just, all right, what would the league be if KG was in it? Not Kobe, not the other names I'm going to name, right? Just KG, plop him into the league. And I'm thinking specifically 04 Kevin Garnett. Just if you look at the game today, some of the most valuable skills are switchability on defense. I would still say rim protection, playmaking, shot creation, ability to space the floor. I don't know if I already said that. Right? These are the most important, and shooting. I just said that. I don't know why. Kevin Garnett had all of those. Kevin Garnett had all of those. Right? When we're looking at his MVP season, we're looking at a guy who is, scoring 24 points a game, grabbing 14 rebounds a game, getting you 2 blocks, getting you a steal and a half. So elite rim protection, and crazy switchability on defense, right? He's able to play make, giving you 5 to 6 assists a game. Even later in his career, just that pick and pop along with Rondo and him, that shit was crazy. I think Kevin Garnett in today's league would be like a weird hybrid between Jokic, Bam, and Giannis. And I think because of the importance back then of low post presence in the 2000s, and also because the Timberwolves are so cheeks, Kevin Garnett was, aside from maybe 04, he was never really in the best in the world conversations. I think if you plop any from 2000 to 07, any of these years in today's league for that stretch, Kevin Garnett is in best in the world conversations every single year. Kevin Garnett is in best in the world conversations every single year. I think defensively he would have a similar impact to Bam. I think offensively, I don't think he's a scorer or passer that Jokic is, but the ability to create your own shot from the perimeter, be a hub at the top of the key, the ability to run pick and pops with you, I think would be crazy, right? You can still give it to Kevin Garnett in the low post. He can run the floor, right? Kevin Garnett was crazy, dog. KG was crazy. And then when you talk about motor, and this is the only reason even the Giannis comparison came in. I guess the running the floor part. But no one is as intense as Kevin Garnett in today's league. Name me a player as intense as Kevin Garnett in today's league. The closest one would be Giannis. KG, I would love to see Kevin Garnett in today's league, dog. Oh my God. KG would be crazy. If Jokic didn't have ultra instinct when it came to the playoffs, I think KG would be the best in the league today. And I think that's a big jump from the conversations he was in back then to the conversations he would be today. Deadass. I think he'd be a perennial All-NBA first team member, perennial DPOY candidate, top 5, top 4 DPOY candidate. While being one of the most valuable offensive weapons in the league. KG would be crazy in today's league, man. Moving on, the next player I want to bring up is Andrei Kirilenko. I think Andrei Kirilenko is a player, out of all the names that I will name in today's video, is the player that takes the biggest leap. The player that his perception, if he played in today's league, would be completely different from what he was in his actual career. So for those who don't know, Andrei Kirilenko was a 6'9" small forward, power forward that played in the 2000s, a little bit into the 2010s, but the majority of his career was in the 2000s. Played for the Utah Jazz, a couple years in Brooklyn, but 1 year in Minnesota. But motherfuckers know him for his Utah days, right? We're looking at a guy who was able to stretch the floor, who was able to put the ball on the court, put the ball on the floor, and make a little, create a shot off the dribble a little. But his main thing was defensive. His defense, right? We're looking at a couple of DPOY, DPOY votings over here. It's kind of hard to win DPOYs back then as a wing when you're competing with Tim Duncan, KG, Ben Wallace, and and these guys, But yeah, just look at it, bro. I ain't gonna lie. I don't know, bro. Again, 6'9", switchable wing who can run the floor, create his own shots, space the floor, was able to average 3.3 blocks, lead the league. I understand he only played 41 games, but the next season, playing 69 games, he was still averaging 3 blocks a game. The season prior, he was still averaging 3 blocks a game. So, long story short, a wing capable of blocking 3 blocks a game, 3 shots a game, getting you 1 to 2 steals a game, closer to 2 a game. I think Andrei Kirilenko in today's league, he would be able to be the second best player on the championship team. I don't think you could say that in the 2000s, but I am confident Andrei Kirilenko and the skill set that he had, how important he would be defensively, could be the second best player on a championship team. I'm seeing I'm seeing a All-NBA selection from Andrei Kirilenko in today's era. I'm seeing multiple All-Star appearances from Andrei Kirilenko in this era. Andrei Kirilenko, I think he'd be fantastic in today's league, man. I think this is a guy that was clearly ahead of his time. And he was getting to the line a decent amount too, and draining them. Like, look at these. And Andrei Kirilenko was a dog. Next one. This is gonna piss a lot of y'all off, man. I ain't gonna lie. I'm gonna say Paul Pierce, man. That might be for a lot of y'all. But Paul Pierce, the truth, I don't think he ever got the respect that he deserved, bro. Because in the early 2000s, there was a lot of dogs in the league, man. A lot of dogs in the leagues in that wing position. Kobe, T-Mac, Vince Carter, Allen Iverson, right? A lot of these dudes were in the league. And in my opinion, despite some of them being on bad situations themselves, not a lot of them were on worse situations than Paul Pierce in his mid-20s in this era right here. And I'm looking at the skill set that Paul Pierce has. I also watched some Paul Pierce tape yesterday. Young Paul Pierce. I need y'all to understand that. I'm thinking about bringing young Paul Pierce. A lot of y'all, and even myself, because I started watching basketball in 08, 09, right? We saw an old Paul Pierce. We saw a Paul Pierce with a slower first step, right? This was the Paul Pierce that we saw. Some of y'all might even know Paul Pierce from the 2012, 2013, 2014 days, right? Y'all don't really know who Paul Pierce is. And I'm going to be honest, I don't really know who Paul Pierce is to the fullest extent as well, but that's why I go back and watch film to get a better understanding. But Paul Pierce, one of the, in my opinion, a commodity, one of the most valuable commodities in today's league, and I think it'll always be, is a switchable shot-creating wing who can space the floor and play make. And I'm looking at Paul Pierce, and I would just find it hard to believe that he would be in worse situations than he was in early Boston. In these years, if he was drafted to any team in today's league, right? Like, even if you get drafted to the worst team nowadays, that would be what? The worst situation, if Paul Pierce was drafted in today's league, would be being drafted to the Wizards or, I don't know, the Hornets. I'm talking about teams that it's gonna take them a while to really put shit together. But if Paul Pierce get drafted to the San Antonio Spurs or the Trail Blazers or the Pistons, like, that's a decent amount of help for a young Paul Pierce to work with. But yeah, all of those attributes that I mentioned, Paul Pierce was that. A volume scorer who was able to create his own shot off the dribble. He was great moving off ball. For his time, even like he was, shooting 40% from three on 6 threes a game in this season. Took a dip the next 2 seasons, I will say that, but went back up to 37, 35, 38, 39, 39, 40. So I would just like to say that Paul Pierce, more likely than not, would be a guy who could shoot the 3 ball really well for today's standards, right? He was already able to give you 6 to 7 rebounds a game back then. He had a couple seasons giving you 5 assists back then. And I understand Paul Pierce wasn't really known for his defense, but he wasn't really a slouch on defense. In my opinion, he was just a solid defender. If anything, he would lean towards being a positive defender than a negative defender, right? I think Paul Pierce will be great in today's league. Again, it's just important to understand that I'm thinking about young Paul Pierce. But looking at his numbers, tell me he wouldn't be somewhere between what Jason Tatum is and Paul George is right now. Tell me in terms of the rankings, he wouldn't be somewhere between that range. I personally think he'd be between that range with the skill set that I just mentioned. I don't know. I guess the only thing that I'm really worried about translating in today's league would be his ability to attack the rim. But I would also, with a lot of players from back in the day, I would just love to see how their attacking the rim numbers, their driving numbers look in an era where if they're able to beat their man from the perimeter, because of the spacing, there's not just 2 bigs clogging up the paint, because that's just how offenses were ran back then. You know what I'm saying? So I would love to see his driving numbers and how that would increase in today's league. I think it would increase in today's league. Durable as well. Like I'm looking at it right now. A lot of 80-game seasons. Was able to draw fouls. I think that's another skill that a lot of people forget about Paul Pierce. He was really good at drawing fouls. And we know how important drawing fouls is in today's league. This is a season where he's getting 10 free throws a game, bro. Like, Paul Pierce is really good at drawing fouls. And I also think in today's league, I understand Paul Pierce is a meme now. I think y'all would love Paul Pierce's bag. If y'all seen the bag of tricks that Paul Pierce had in the early 2000s, I think a lot of hoopers would love Paul Pierce and the way that he played. It's just when y'all see his highlights now, it's from like the late 2000s when he was slower, so it doesn't look as clean. But trust, again, just watch early 2000s Paul Pierce, and I think you would appreciate him more than you do right now. Maybe you won't, and you just hate the Celtics. I get that too. And the last player that I want to bring up is Steve Nash. Yes, Steve Nash. Steve Nash. It was hard for me to put them on this list, even though, I already put Kobe and KG, because of the fact that he did win 2 MVPs. In the mid 2000s, and honestly was very close to winning 3 MVPs in the mid 2000s. So let me preface this and say, like, all of these dudes were being appreciated in their time. I do think in hindsight, Steve Nash, even with the 2 MVPs, was still a player that I think a lot of NBA fans underappreciated because they didn't really know how he, what they were seeing would change the game. And I do still think Steve Nash, when it comes to the discussion about old NBA players, old NBA legends that would translate better in today's league, would be a player that would translate better in today's league. I think in today's era, compared to back then, he would be a more valuable player in today's era relative to back then. I know that sounds counterintuitive because of the fact that he won MVPs back then, but I think his skill set is just more valuable in today's league than it was back then. For one, I just think his numbers would shoot up. You know, if you look at these numbers, you know, his best seasons was 19 points a game, 10 to 11 assists a game on really good assist-to-turnover ratio. We know he was a perennial 50, 40, 90 club member. I think with the pace of today's game, if you put him on Indiana's offense or some shit, if you put him in Sacramento's offense, Dallas's offense, if you put him in a lot of offenses, man, Steve Nash, in my opinion, would not be that far off from what we're seeing from Tyrese Halliburton, and I think he would be better than Tyrese Halliburton. I think Steve Nash is a guy capable of giving you 24 to 25 points a game in today's league. I think he's a guy that the 11 to 12 assists, the 10 to 11 assists will stay the same. I think the efficiency will stay the same. Aside from three-point percentage, this might go down, but I think the volume, which he already showed capabilities of, the volume of three-point attempts he would take would go up to 8 or 9, and I still think he can maintain 42 to 43%, right? I think Steve Nash will kill it in today's league. And just off of that alone, I think Steve Nash's perception would be much better if we were looking at a guy in his prime who was averaging 25 and 10 or 24, 23 and 10, as opposed to a dude, because I feel like that's why a lot of people have trouble putting Steve Nash in these conversations. You know, with not to say that he's on that level, but even back then, the best in the world conversation, right? Because it's hard for you to fathom a guy who should be in that conversation when he's averaging less than 20 points a game. But I think the perception would be much different if, again, he wasn't just a 19-point per game scorer. He would be a 24, 25-point per game scorer, giving you 10 assists on crazy efficiency. I think that alone would shoot and make my case for him. And I also think if you look at Steve Nash's career path, right? Steve Nash came into the league at 22. Off the bench, played 40 games over here. Off the bench again, and this is when he truly became a starter for him. I don't think it takes that long for Steve Nash to get to this status right here. I don't. I think Steve Nash out the gate, even if he came in at 22, people would already know what's up. Steve Nash is a great shooter who can pass the ball and handle the rock at an extremely high level. That would be known already going into the gate. And I think people back then were just cautious on that because of, you know, the perceptions with the three ball, you know, how Steve Nash plays defensively. Those were really big questions about Steve Nash. But in today's league, I think off rip, you know, Steve Nash is being built around or being a very important cornerstone to a franchise piece. And Steve Nash would not be a late bloomer. So again, imagine Steve Nash possibly even coming into the league earlier, right? These early years, shit, we could do it right now. You could do it right now, right? I forgot I could do this. Imagine Steve Nash, and you go on Basketball Reference, right? And this is what his seasons are looking like. Hopefully I didn't mess it up. Chat. Hold on. Okay, hopefully I didn't mess it up. But yeah, you go to Steve Nash's page, and it starts off right here. This is what his rookie numbers, maybe not rookie numbers. This is what his second year in the league numbers are looking like. And then by here, it's up to 22 and 11. By here, it's 23 and a half and 11. By here, we might even have a 26 point per game season. But let's stay conservative, 24 and 10 on crazy efficiency. You're seeing a lot of all-star appearances over here. You're seeing a lot of all-NBAs over here. Yeah, I think despite... I don't think Steve Nash would win an MVP in today's era, but I do still think his perception league-wide would still be much better in today's era, if that makes sense. But, yeah, let me know what y'all think, though. Interesting conversation to me. From my old heads out there that would be more confident in putting 90s players in these conversations, please let me know. You know, I want to shout out Lamar Odom in this conversation. I want to shout out to Chris Webber in this conversation. I was looking at these guys as well. I know a decent amount of people through my research brought up a guy like Rod Strickland. Arvydas Sabonis, Larry Bird. I don't know, but I don't know. Larry Bird is one of those names where, like, is he gonna be better in today's era, or is he just gonna still be great? I'm thinking about players who would be better in today's era. But with that being said, let me know what y'all think. And I'm out, man. Peace.